Did you already test it? Yeah? Great.
Well, good evening and welcome. My name is James Preston. I'm one of the pastors. Our associate pastor, Clayton Edwards, is doing wonderful AV work this evening with the help of his family and his son, Clark, who is the expert AV guy. So anyway, we are, on behalf of Clayton, myself, and all of the leaders and lay leadership of Kingswood Church, we welcome you, where we love God, serve others, and build sacred community as followers of Jesus. So a warm welcome to all of you. A welcome to our district superintendent, Reverend Brittany Isaac, and for all the churches represented. We are just delighted to host you. Just so you know, there's refreshments at the table just against the wall in the fireside room. You are welcome to bring coffee and refreshments here into the sanctuary. And feel free to get up and self-serve whatever you need. We have water and coffee and decaf and the whole bit. So I hope you'll make yourself at home. If you haven't discovered this yet, they're accessible unisex, unigender restrooms down East Hall, and then there's a set of restrooms down Central Hall. And we just encourage you to make yourself at home. And if there's anything we can do, I'm going to invite Kingswood folks to raise their hands. And we'll be here along with our greeters to help and offer our hospitality in any way that we can. So again, a warm welcome. We also want to welcome our online audience today, and we are glad that you're here wherever you are and whenever you are watching. We welcome you to this event and pray that tonight is a wonderful moment for you as we explore our merger together. So again, a warm welcome, and I now invite Brittany Isaac forward. Will you give her a warm welcome?
Thank you guys for coming tonight and for driving amidst the weather. I want to start this time with prayer, and I just heard there was a terrible accident, Wendy, you were sharing maybe, in which somebody was killed. I believe so. Yeah. At the Mount Prospect Metra tracks. Okay. Yeah. Okay, well, let's start with prayer. Gracious God, we are aware that tonight we gather from across many points in the Chicagoland area amidst busy lives, and yet we gather knowing and understanding the sacredness of life. Knowing that in this moment there are births and deaths. People are coming from you and going to you. And so we lift up the family from the young person that was hit by the train tonight. May your spirit of love and peace be felt deep in their souls as they struggle with this life-changing news. We also, God, lift up our congregations. Tonight, these large congregations are trying to be open to the movement of your spirit. And so we ask that you open our hearts, open our ears and eyes to see how you might be moving and the ways that you might be calling congregations to gather in new ways. It has been a chaotic couple of years, and yet you are faithful. May we continue to be faithful to you. We pray this all in Jesus' name. Amen. So I want to do a couple invitations tonight before we get into the actual PowerPoint. Raise your hand if you, well, let's call out the churches and let's not put me on the spot. So, so Wendy from Mount Prospect, and raise your hand if you're from the Mount Prospect Church. Great. Trinity, awesome. We already did Kingswood. First Korean is in the house. Let's see, Evanston First is in the house. Arlington Heights First is in the house. And I think I forgot a church. Urban Village is in the house. Okay, great. That's all of them, right? Okay, now we know who's here. Tomorrow night, I'll be hosting a meeting with some of the smaller churches, and I will let you know those churches later on that I'm inviting into conversation about the possibility of being adopted. So 2 separate meetings. The power dynamics are different. I ask that you hold those congregations in prayer. It's a lot easier to be in this meeting than that one. The other introduction I want to do is some of the folks from my district building and location team are here. We call that the debacle committee. Everybody has an abbreviation in United Methodist Land, so debacle. So Ben is on that committee, and Stuart, and James actually serves as the co-chair. So, and that committee does 2 things. One is helping to support and resource churches related to their buildings. The other is to look at strategy related to churches, right? So church planting, church redevelopment, and even some strategy around where we're located and where we're not, and where we should be, and where it's not going well, all of that stuff. So, okay. Is there anything I can do to make this not wiggle? It's just me. I have small ears. Grow bigger ears? Is that kind of it? Cram it down. Pinch it. Okay. All right. How's that? We'll see if I keep moving. The other thing I want to say is that I envision this to be a collaborative process, right? So ideally, I'm facilitating a conversation, but a lot of this has to come from the congregations. And if congregations aren't on board with this, it's not going to be successful, right? I mean, there's some of the change management stuff, right? If you get past a certain amount, of course, there's always going to be dissenters, right? A handful of few. But by and large, the congregation has to be bought into this sort of thing. So with that said, let's go to the next slide, or the first slide. So what I'm presenting tonight is one model of basically a merger of two congregations. It is called the adoption model. I first heard about it at a seminar that we held. We've had it a couple of times, and we're going to have another one in December, I think. I'll look at my notes. And so this is just one model of merging, okay? And so what to define it, because now I don't know if that's big enough font for you all. To define it, a larger, healthier congregation that would be all of y'all come alongside a smaller, struggling congregation, and you basically take your values and mission, your branding, your identity, and bring that into the struggling congregation. So what this means is the larger church will send people to that site. So ideally, you're going to be in a location where you already have people coming from, if that makes sense. So if we're in Buffalo Grove and you have people living in, I'm just making something up, Elk Grove, you probably wouldn't want to go to Long Grove, right? I hope I got my geography. Are those, okay, good. You would want to kind of go where you're pulling from in some ways. You would train that church, the smaller church, on your values and mission and culture, and then you would basically focus on how to take this struggling church into a more healthy place. So now the churches that I'm going to be meeting with are not long gone churches. They're churches with a lot of potential, for a variety of reasons, might be struggling. So I'm not going to introduce you to what we would call hopeless causes. They would be churches where there's a lot of excitement and potential. So why would we do this? The next slide. We do this because we can do things so much better together than we can separately. We do this because honestly, it's a lot easier to do something like this than to plant a new church. So having been a pastor that planted the third site of an existing church, it's a lot easier to bring all of that with than to start something completely from scratch. And in many ways, this is kind of like planting a new site of your congregation. So when we do that, we're beginning a new life cycle, and we're beginning it for that new congregation, but also, if any of you have ever been part of a family where you're expecting a new child, a new baby, or adopting, or there's like this excitement and energy that comes, right? Like, and so it also gives like a boost of excitement into your current congregation as well. Obviously, we want to do this to reach more people for Christ, particularly in trends where we are seeing less and less people are engaged in Christianity. This is a way for us to expand and reach more people. It allows us to do mission better, to make a difference in our communities. It multiplies your congregation's impact. And it, as it says, it leverages all that you have, right? If you already have a good reputation, you're able to just put that into another site, right? It makes sense. It also allows us to maximize our facilities, and just it brings strength to your local church. One of the things I'll say also, today our co-chairs of building locations, so James and another woman named Cece Huang, who's the other co-chair, we met with Mission Insight, and one of the things that I found to be really interesting, and I'll tell you more about Mission Insight later, is that unchurched people, which we know that is a growing population, will not drive any more than 10 minutes to get to church. So you may have a really great church, but if people live outside of that 10-minute drive, they're probably not going to bother. And so this gives us the opportunity to multiply your impact by expanding into different locations. Okay, next slide, please. Now, I just listed all of the sort of pragmatic reasons, but foundational to this is that we can't do this work unless we have a biblically based mission, a shared theology and practice together, right? All of this is grounded in that. Even as we talk about the pragmatics of it, I want to make sure that we keep that before us. The other thing is adoptions, and this is probably something that the smaller churches need to learn more here, but also you. It's not a status quo kind of thing, right? It shifts. For you all, with the exception of Urban Village, and I know First Korean has dabbled with some multi-site stuff too, it changes your dynamics too to end up going to a multi-site staff. Going from 1 to 2 is difficult. Going from 2 to 3 is difficult, but once you get that down, it's easy. So I've heard from churches that have a lot of multi-site, yeah. But it's when you have 2, you can kind of be hustling, like some really strong pastors can hustle, but after that, you have to eventually get systems in place. All right, next slide, please. So the stages of the merger. We tonight are at the very beginning stages. So we're in the exploring stage. This is not something that's going to happen immediately. It is very possible that we're having this conversation tonight and it's the next DS that you're working with, that you'll be doing it with, because I hope to make some I hope we have something maybe in 23. We'll see. 24 is more likely as an appointment, but it could be 25, 26, right? Now, we don't want to kick the can too far down the road because if you're not ready by then, you'll never be ready, quite honestly, right? But this is not, have a meeting and begin. So tonight we're exploring. When we leave here tonight, I'm going to give you a couple of next steps. You'll continue to explore. Some of you will say, this is the perfect next step for us. We want to move toward this. Others will say, we're ready to expand our ministry, but we want to do it in a different way. So this isn't the only way to go, but this is a way. So if you get to the point where you feel like, yeah, this actually could be something, then you're going to move into a getting along stage where hopefully there'll be a church from tomorrow night that'll also get past that exploring stage. And God willing, that church might be in a location that's a target area for you. Do you see how the Holy Spirit really is going to have to work with all of this? Because it's it's a lot of working around, but hopefully there'll be a church or two that is interested in working with a larger church, and this will all kind of come together, right? So then you get into this time of it's almost like dating, right? Are we going to get along? And I'll talk more about what that can look like. And then talking more about okay, so you start looking at the logistics. What does it mean for this? How does this work? You're preparing, you're finalizing, and then eventually taking on the family values. So those are just the stages. We are at the beginning tonight. Just want to take that away. Okay, next. Some of the questions that you might ask, and you can start asking these tonight, is their growth potential. So when you're thinking about, when we get to the part where we have some communities identified of potential churches that might want to be adopted, the question that you as a larger church would have to ask is there growth potential? Is this the right location, right? Does this seem like, we're going to talk about mission insight in a little bit, the people that we draw, do they live in that community that makes sense for us to go there? So is there growth potential? Is this merger possible? Do we share values? Does it seem like it could work, right? And then feasible, right? So it could work, but do we want it to, right? Is it, do the finances make sense? Do the logistics, all of that? desirable, all of this. And then DNA, while the adopting church basically is putting their DNA in that congregation's only going to receive it if there's somewhat similar values, right? So there has to be some congruence there. The other thing I'll say is, and this gets at it as well, you have to look at your demographics, right? So most of the churches that we're inviting to this look a lot like you, right? Actually, I invited First Korean, but I don't have any Korean churches tomorrow night because I think we're going to have a separate meeting where probably I will be the listener and there will be a primary language of Korean spoken to talk with some of the smaller churches about, and there's different demographic stuff around what does the Korean population look like in Chicago in the future, but we wouldn't have a situation where a predominantly white church is going to come into a predominantly Filipino congregation and decide that they're going to adopt it, right? That would be colonialism, and we won't do that. So you'll see that the congregations will look a lot like you, and have. Hopefully you'll find some are more liberal, some are more conservative, but hopefully you'll find churches that might fit with some of the values that you would have. All right, next slide. Yep. Oh, no, that's not the next slide. I have one more slide before that goes. The criteria for adoptions? Yeah, okay. So I spoke a little bit about all of this first, but we'll say it again. So again, are you financially healthy enough to take on another site? Now, obviously that other site is getting along just fine. All of the sites have full-time pastors. They're paying their apportionments. It's not, so when you take on that site, you would not be paying their apportionments because if a congregation merges, there's only one apportionment. But there might be some upgrades to the facility you want to take. You would end up, so ideally if you have an associate pastor or another staff member that's discerning ordained ministry, that person becomes the pastor at the adopted site. So your staff, you would have to, so we've had some preliminary conversations here at Kingswood. And so Clayton is in the process. We've sent him, done church planting assessment with him, and somebody has yet to be reviewing that yet, but thinking about who he is, possibly as a planter. If he would go to that other site, then there's a hole here staffing-wise, right? So you have to think about what that looks like financially. Now, that other site was able to pay for a full-time pastor, so it shouldn't tax this system, but you get what I'm saying. It shuffles things around, and you have to think through that. The distance in the mission field, what Dirk Elliott, who's the one that wrote this Vital Merger book, says is that ideally you're looking at a 20 to 25-minute drive. That's different than what I heard today with the unchurched, but you might already have folks that are driving 20 to 25 minutes, and so they would be closer. But I think the driving is also about the staffing being able to get together. If they're having to drive too far away, that makes it difficult. We talked about the church cultures having compatibility, about there being potential. So again, that's some demographic work to see what's there. And then what does it mean to become multi-site, and how do we do that? What does staff, meeting look like? How do the responsibilities shift? All of that. So, okay. Now what we're going to do is, some of you may have seen this at the laity convocation, but we have had one church that has essentially is in process of adopting a smaller church. And this happened in 2019. And I'll tell you what, I hadn't read Dirk Elliott's book before that time. And if I had, we would have done it completely differently. But you can't go back in time. And it's working out well. It's working out well primarily because the pastor that is working on merging the two congregations is a very experienced pastor, because Urban Village Church has a strong branding, values, mission. So what we did in 2019, Christian Kuhn, who co-planted Urban Village Church, was getting at the point where, as lead pastor, he wasn't enjoying all the administrative stuff. He'd rather be doing the kind of planting stuff. And so what we did is he remained with Urban Village half-time. Is that right? Yeah, half-time, as the pastor of new initiatives or something? Emerging ministries. And the administrative responsibilities shifted to two of the associates. And then the other half-time, he was at River Forest United Methodist Church. Now, what I'll tell you is in 2018, when I was doing the church conference season, I got to River Forest United Methodist Church, and they had to vote to transfer a certain amount of money from their endowment interest to the budget in order to pay for their full-time pastor for 20 people in worship. And they'd been doing that for many years. And when I heard that that's what they were doing, I immediately said, is this God's dream for these resources? Like, I just couldn't believe that, 20 people, they have all this money in an endowment to transfer for full-time ministry for 20 people in worship. And they're like, oh, well, we don't know. We want to grow. We're trying. And they did. They wanted to grow. They just didn't quite know how, right? So in the 2019 appointment season, we set up this half-time. But here's the catch. River Forest had enough funds. They basically paid 3/4 time of the salary for Pastor Christian, while Urban Village paid 1/4, but it became this beautiful relationship, and they're finding their way through, and it's not without hiccups, and like I said, we wouldn't do it this way if we do it, but I want you to kind of hear some of the learnings. I think this is a 10-minute video, so we'll watch it, and then I'll speak for a minute, and then we'll invite Juan Pablo.
Well, hello, Northern Illinois Conference. We appreciate the invitation to speak with you, Lay Academy. My name is Christian Kuhn. I am a pastor at Urban Village Church. I'm also the pastor at River Forest United Methodist Church. And we've been invited to come and talk a little bit about the ministry partnership that Urban Village and River Forest UMC have been a part of the last 2.5 years. And so I've invited some of our folks to be with us today, 3 of whom from River Forest UMC, all members of our Staff Parish Relations Committee, Becky Ennett, Cindy Bell, and Jerry Hills, and then also invited somebody from our new Urban Village site, UBC West, Holly Katz, though Holly's been a part of Urban Village since the very beginning in 2010. So we're going to dive right in. We don't have a lot of time and just want to share some reflections. So the first question I want to ask some of the River Forest folks is, how would you describe the state of the church and its ministry over the last, say, 20 to 30 years?
Well, that question brought up a word in my mind immediately, which was declining. Because even as far back as 30 years ago, 20, 30 years ago, we were already seeing the signs on the wall. And it was problematic because we were more or less thriving at the time, and some members thought we were just fine, thank you very much. But others could see it coming. And it did lead to some kind of factions believing, as it started, that pastor blaming was the way to get out of your decline. And we went through, as you would in 20 or 30 years, a series of pastors, every one of whom was supposed to fix the problem, and we wouldn't be in decline anymore, yet the decline was persistent no matter what every pastor tried to do. And at this point, I would say, looking back with 2020 hindsight, the congregation itself should have been more proactive and not so dependent on pastors to fix things, and more realistic in what they were seeing and what the future was going to hold and how to adapt.
And I would just add to that that I came into the church, I guess the first time I attended was in 1996, and I saw what Cindy is mentioning and over the years. And I think we had a sort of a traditional way of doing worship in our ministries that had worked for a long time, and we continue to do that under all of these pastors. And the fact is that that traditional way of doing ministry was not going to sustain us in the long term, that we needed to make some changes to the way that we approached serving our community and what our focus was. And I think it's hard for congregation, it's hard for pastors. I think it just, was a challenge. And so we saw with several pastors who had all kinds of, abilities and qualifications that, continuing to do what we've been doing just was causing us to dwindle.
Jerry, I'm going to ask you this, start with you with this next question. So I think the initial proposal about a potential partnership with Urban Village and River Forest came up, I want to say early 2019. Mm-hmm. And so what were some of your initial reactions to the possibilities of this?
I wrote this down because honestly, the first thing that struck me was uncertainty. What the heck are we getting into? What's going to happen? Are we going to change completely? Are we going to maintain our identity? Are we being absorbed? All those questions came up. And it took several meetings, to be honest, to talk about those issues and help people express them, as you were saying. It felt a little bit manipulated in the beginning, but that abated pretty quickly as soon as we started meeting members of UVC and recognizing that we were going to be an arm of Urban Village Church in the western suburbs. So those uncertainties and fears turned around fairly quickly to this can work.
I should have talked a little bit, and we can go into a lot of detail here too, but the initial proposal was that we used the metaphor of dating each other to see if
right.
This would be a fit, the two congregations. This is something that Urban Village has never done before. Is usually with Urban Village, we started new sites out of nothing. And here there was a group of faithful folks that we were going to be working with. So we've talked about lots of different things. So now we're in this place where there's two separate entities, but we do a lot of ministry together. And so including worship and service opportunities, discipleship groups, things like that. And right now it seems to be working okay. Becky and Cindy, what would you say, what do you think in this 2 years or so of being in ministry together, what has gone well in so far?
Definitely building friendships and bridges, because we're nice people and UVC are nice people and friendly, and it shows. I mean, it just kind of comes out. And since a partnership is very, very different than a merger, I think anybody considering this needs to look at some of the things we did right and some of the things we did wrong. And one of the things I would echo that Jerry was saying is at the very beginning, I think we didn't know a lot of what was going on at the UVC side. And so you need to structure it a little bit differently than you did for us. Make it better for the next group that wants to do this. And we didn't know what was going on in terms of what Jerry was mentioning. Are we sort of disappearing as River Forest? And what does partnership make? And that wasn't all that upfront at first. And so there were concerns about money, particularly whose money is whose and how to mingle that. Then we had a charge conference and a couple other meetings where we actually got to talk to the VC people and break everything down. Talking to each other directly was a huge thing. And to see the excitement on their part, hey, we got a building now. hey, we got all this. I mean, it was just so, like Jerry said, it all fell into place then. So learn from our mistakes, but also learn from our successes when you try this.
And I guess I would say that what I've seen over the last couple of years that has been very exciting to me and very heartening is, we now have more of a multi-generational congregation. Yes, we're two groups in partnership, but we worship together, and we have children's church together and all of that, and people work on missions together. And we've got lots of younger folks. We've got kids. We've got just, a much more dynamic group of people. And I feel like there's a lot of energy now where there wasn't. I think, we had a core of people that were working very hard to keep the church going, but we were tired. And I feel like we've got, a new infusion of energy. And as Cindy and Jerry said, I just love the people of Urban Village too. And I love the inclusiveness and that whole emphasis. And that has been just so exciting and heartening to see.
Yeah, I want to echo a couple things that Cindy said. Transparency is huge, and we probably could have done a better job of that. And then just open and honest communication. I think one of the real turning points that I noticed, and I don't know if, in fact, Cindy, I think, so we had a post, I think this was January of 2020, back pre-pandemic days. We had a post-worship meeting, and then we had a potluck the next month. And those were huge for both groups to begin to talk to one another and eat together, have a meal together, so that relationships could be built. And that was, I think, Cindy, you came up to me after one of those meetings. I can't remember. I'm totally paraphrasing what you said, but you shared just how much more confident you were that this was going to work. And so, yeah, I was grateful for that.
All the information was flowing. I mean,
Yeah.
we're trailblazers here, I'll tell you.
Yeah, no, totally.
So it's not that it was intentionally done. We just didn't know what we were doing in terms of creating that transparency right up front. So that's what I would give as a proviso to anyone else on how to structure this.
Yeah, it's okay to say we don't know what we're doing here, but we're going forth in faith.
Yeah, because now I think we know what we're doing.
Yeah.
Great.
Holly,
I hope so.
Yeah.
Holly, can you share a little bit from the kind of your own experiences from the UVC perspective, and what were some of the things that some of the fears perhaps that you had going into this, and then what are the things coming out of it now that you think are going well, or maybe that we continue to work on?
Well, I was pretty excited about it from the beginning, selfishly, because I had recently moved to the western suburbs and was really sad about leaving my church community at UVC in the city, and really wasn't able to find anything that I was excited about by me, a new church community. And so the idea of the partnership with River Forest was sort of like the exact answer that I had been hoping for. And so I really don't think that I can't name any fears that I had going in. I would say that something that I was really excited about was a multi-generational congregation. I think that that's something that I was longing for at some of the other UVC sites in the city. And so being able to look into the congregation and see all the generations worshiping together is something that feels really special to me. And also I think is such a value to be able to see what a faithful community looks like, people who have been worshiping together for 30 plus years, who's, have raised their families in the church and who are still there, knowing everything about each other's lives, and even just, little tidbits about like where the nativity scene that was out in the church lawn, like who built that and who made that. Like in talking to people in the congregation, learning that somebody that was a parishioner actually built that. Like those are really neat things, the history of a congregation that's been worshiping together for so long. And I think that something else that's been really exciting is learning about the traditions that have been in the church for such a long time. Cindy, the gift giving that you lead around Christmas time, and Jerry with the food pantry, and being able to see that those have been really lasting ministries over so many years. it feels really powerful to be a part of those. And it feels like those things are things that that the UVC folks coming into this partnership can really learn from and build on.
Yeah, thanks, Holly. So we were asked to keep this around 10 minutes. And so obviously there's so much more we could talk about, and we can talk a little bit about some of the specifics. I actually wrote a short little book about this whole experience, and I can tell Mark about that if folks are interested in learning more. But Becky, Cindy, Jerry, any last words, reflections that you wanted to share before we close this up?
I really appreciate hearing Holly's perspective. Thank you very much for that. When the pandemic's over, we got a few more that we haven't been able to do lately that we'll hit you with that I feel like.
I can't.
Sorry about that, guys.
Go ahead,
So
Becky.
I was just going to say that, you know, we are a work in progress, and one of the things that I'm looking forward to and hoping that we can continue to maybe improve is the way we worship, combining the traditional elements and the contemporary elements. And as someone who sang in the chancel choir for many years, you know, I miss that, and I would like to be part of the contemporary worship music that we're now doing. And so I look forward to not sort of going on parallel tracks with those things, but actually beginning to integrate the River Forest folks and the UVC folks, you know, on one worship team, on one music, you know, praise team. And, you know, that just an example of something where I think, you know, it just takes time, but we are enjoying what we're doing.
Yeah.
And just look forward to deepening the relationship.
I also think that, I know that many of the things that where we wish we could be today we're not there. And that's simply because of the upsetting the apple cart of COVID. I mean, we didn't have the opportunity to do the grand opening as we had wished because we were not worshiping in person for so long. And to me, that's just such a big hole in my life as not to be able to gather on a Sunday morning. But yeah, we will all be together again.
I give us huge points for getting this far during a pandemic. Yeah. Nobody starts a partnership during a pandemic, let alone make it succeed. That's faith, people. That's faith.
Amen.
Amen.
That's a good place to end on. So thanks everybody for participating. And again, for anybody who's watching this part of the Lay Academy, feel free to reach out to myself, Cindy Bell as the lay leader for River Forest UMC, and Holly as a key leader for UVC West. And we're happy to share more about our experiences. So thank you, everybody.
So as they said, and I'll have you come up in a minute, Juan Pablo, their experience, can you go back to the stages slide? Yeah. So their experience basically, and this is because I did do top down, they sort of like had to get into the getting along because of the appointment, right? And the way I got them there, I mean, they had a lot of questions and I tried to answer, and a lot of the answers to my questions were, I'm not really sure. We'll have to figure it out as we go along. So UVC had their work of discernment to do, and part of their work was the name of our congregation is Urban Village Church. Are we okay going into the suburbs, right? It's a big, I mean, that was a big question. They also have a vision to and desire to be a multiracial congregation steeped in anti-racism values. And so they, and Juan Pablo, you can talk a little bit about the analysis that happened. And but so they had their own questions that they had to answer. And then, and part of it was just like, do we want to be in the suburbs? And with Christian, I was like, yeah, we don't know if this will be UVC, but can you just explore if this is a good place to plant a church? And I knew like he had experience. I didn't have to, like he would do it. You know what I mean? Not that, I'm just going to put you on this spot, Clayton. Not that somebody like Clayton couldn't, but he just graduated seminary, right? Versus Christian that had 20 years of ministry experience. It makes a difference, right? But we love you. And then River Forest, and they still have this question. We have a really large endowment. We don't know if we want to let go of that. And that's something that they're struggling, because a merger means you merge, right? So at this point, River Forest and Urban Village Church are two separate entities, but they worship at the same time and they do a lot of their stuff together. So that being said, I'm going to invite Juan Pablo to come up. Juan Pablo is now, well, he's been around the UVC orb for a while.
Yes.
He came as a layperson through UVC and then got his license, went to seminary, got his license, and he was appointed to Melrose Park Cosmopolitan, which is a predominantly Filipino congregation. And we kind of did something similar where we're like, I knew UVC wanted to explore a site that could be like Latinx, for example. So I was like, Juan Pablo, go see if this would be a good place for that. So is that enough of an introduction?
Yes.
Okay. So please welcome Juan Pablo.
Thank you. So I think I'll begin there. So at Urban Village, when I started going there, I said I would love if we had an inclusive, bold, relevant ministry for Latinos in Chicago. There are not many inclusive Spanish-speaking, contemporary churches, especially in the places I grew up. So when the opportunity came to kind of look at Melrose Park, which is 74% Latinx, I jumped at the idea of exploring. And so we, along with Cosmopolitan United Church, decided to explore. Now, whenever Urban Village decides to plant a new site, we have an anti-racism team that kind of looks at and asks a lot of questions. We want to make sure that we don't go into a neighborhood with all these resources and kind of take over churches or take over neighborhoods or displace churches that have been there for a while. So we did that with River Forest, and we did that in Melrose Park. And so the differences were, in Melrose Park, Cosmopolitan United Church, although it's a Filipino church and very close in culture to Mexican culture, and so it felt right. We had some of the DNA that we were talking about, and the only difference, a big difference, was they had a very conservative service, not conservative, traditional service, and we had a more contemporary service, so we would have to figure that out. Other than that, the love for the community was there. And when we started doing some of the work, we realized that Cosmopolitan is in the white neighborhood of Melrose Park, white kind of middle upper class area of Melrose Park. In order for us to reach out to the Latinos, we'd have to go to the other side of the city, of the town, but there's already a beautiful ministry that is growing there, part of the Methodist Church. And so we decided that it would displace them if we did that. Did the same thing at River Forest, and there was not going to be any displacement of any other white churches there. So the match was better there. The way I think Christian wanted me to share a little bit about their finances and how that works. So for River Forest, since they do have separate, they share expenses such as paying for salary and housing for Christian. They also pay the children's minister. That one's interesting because that gets shared throughout all of Urban Village. Helps to put together programming for all of our sites. So that's something that they pay for. Urban Village pays for the worship leader. But because the children's ministry is growing so fast there, the children's ministry asked River Forest if they can please get a new floor for their room, and River Forest now is paying for that. So although they're separate, they work together. They had even decided if they were going to have two different services, maybe a contemporary and traditional service. and River Forest decided, no, we'll join the service with you. So there's one service for both sites. And like they were saying, perhaps kind of putting together the members from River Forest and the worship team from Urban Village into one, I think would probably be their next step. Yeah. Any?
Do you want to say about, you said about Melrose Park, but just so what you're doing?
Yes. So once we did this racial equity impact assessment, and I can give you kind of the questions and what we looked at and how we put that together with a team. So I built a team, a launch team that came to Cosmopolitan, and we worked together to figure out if this would work with both of us. The congregation, Urban Village, is very inclusive of many things. And so to come to another congregation that might be very new. Not that they're not, it's just new. And taking into consideration our own cultures of what that means to accept trans people or to accept LGBTQ people or marry them in the church, that was a lot to hit them with at the same time. But we were able to even then find some similarities. And so instead of staying there at Cosmopolitan and merging or adopting or partnering with the church and in that community, we decided to go inside the city and look at other areas. And so now we landed on Hermosa, which is by Pulaski and Fullerton, if you've ever been around there, and which is a place that's growing because Latinos are being displaced from Humboldt Park, Logan Square, and Avondale are displaced there. And so since then we've had, I was able to move into a parsonage that's owned by Humboldt Park United Methodist Church. So we're still kind of partnering with another church, but in different ways, and are able now to start a new ministry and kind of plant that there in a different way. So.
Stay close by,
sure.
though, because we're going to do Q&A in just a minute. Okay, so I think we just have another couple slides. So next steps, begin to pray, continue to pray. I don't know, maybe you guys have already begun praying before tonight. If this is a possibility for your future. There is a Vital Partnership workshop. It is in Itasca on December 3rd. It's already on the conference calendar, so you can search that way. Think about the kind of systems and processes that you would need to go multi-site. In the Vital Partnership workshop, and I took some pretty good notes, but he gives you all sorts of questions that the adopting church needs to reflect on, and so I can send those to you. You can go to the workshop as well. He also sends questions that the adoptee church needs to reflect on. So begin to think about those questions. I'm going to share the smaller churches here in a moment. But think about if they might make good partnerships. 2 books that I could recommend reading. The first one is Dirk Elliott, who wrote Vital Merger, and he's the one that'll be leading the workshop on December 3rd. And then the second one, Christian mentioned, he wrote about church partnerships and expanding the expedition. So those are 2 books. And then finally, you can plot your congregation on Mission Insight. This is how would you describe it? A demographics website, Christian-based. I think the founder, huh?
It's like a database.
Yeah, the founder is actually a United Methodist elder and appointed to Extension Ministry, I guess. And it's a lot of the data that marketing firms use, but then you have the ability to look at it instead of convincing people to buy the next iPhone. We can look at that with reflecting and thinking about what it means to offer people Christ. So better use of the data, right? We were just talking about possibly maybe doing a training, but one of the things that you can do, and Wendy, sorry to put you on the spot, but actually when we were doing the demo today, we were looking at your data. So you have the ability to take your congregants' addresses, you don't have to tie their names to it, but addresses, and then plot that on the map, right? And then you're able to see where people are coming from. You're also able to see like the demographic segments that pull from that. I'm putting you on the spot, but do you want to talk about how that helped you at all in church planting, or not church planting, but just in your congregational work? Did you find that helpful?
You mean like 3 or 4 years ago?
I guess, yeah, I don't know.
It's been so long. I'm just trying to remember. I mean, certainly, I think what I'm remembering more is the various categories
Categories, yep.
that we looked at.
Yeah, sorry. So we can play around with this, not tonight, but it certainly will give you the ability. I mean, it's a very valuable tool. I realized I've been playing with it for 5-10 years, and I'm just realizing how powerful it is, that there's way more today after the demo. So go ahead, if you.
Yeah. No, I was just going to say, I think what we did, if I'm remembering correctly, it's been a year or two since I've even looked at all this, but we drew a half a mile around the church, and then we got tons of information just about who lived within that half-mile radius, basically. Fascinating information. It's actually time for us to go back and look at that again, because I think it's just something congregations should look at over and over and over again. So, they kind of divide people into categories like, I don't know, hip young singles, or, just different kind of fun categories like that, which marketing firms use. I mean, what we found, we kind of looked at the top 3 categories within that. So thanks. I was really trying to go back in the files.
It was
and
interesting that she
remember.
pulled up your church, and we were kind of seeing where everybody was plotted. Because contrary to popular belief, actually, I know you already know this, most people don't live really close to their church. Though, like we said, if people don't have a church experience, it is going to be the people in the neighborhood, they're not going to go a long, long ways. Okay, so can I do Q&A, and then after all of it's done, I'll show you the churches. I don't want those really broadcast, because I'm just trying to be really, I know that they feel very nervous, and So is that all right? Okay. So we're going to do Q&A, questions, any question except which churches am I meeting with tomorrow? And Juan Pablo also can answer questions as well. So I should have worn my red glasses. I have red glasses. I could have been like Sally, Jesse, Raphael. Yeah, running all over. Yeah.
Okay, maybe this is a silly question. So I think you said one service, but at both sites. Does that mean like a videotape, or people are doing the same service at each site?
That's a great question. So that's one of the questions related to that you're kind of discerning up front. And honestly, like speaking from the perspective of Urban Village, I think they've done some different iterations of that, right? Like it changes. So it might be, again, I'm just going to use the two of you. Clayton, sorry, I couldn't think of your name. Clayton is at Everywhere United Methodist Church now, that is Kingswood 2 or whatever, right? And he preaches live there, and Pastor James preaches live here. Could be that. Could be that there's only one preacher, and it gets piped in. It's whatever the congregation wants to do. Yep. It gets at efficiency versus effectiveness, right? One preacher, one pastor spending time on one sermon is more efficient than two separate preachers doing two separate sermon prep. But you might find that in-person preaching is more effective, right? Urban Village for a while, when Hannah was on staff, was the teaching pastor. And so she did a lot of the exegetical work, I believe. And sort of these are some points that you want to think about with your sermon that then I think saved the preachers time, so that they're still writing their sermon, I think, but, and you could speak better to this, but some, like it was almost a hybrid of yeah, do you want to speak?
We were, pastors who did a time analysis, and they were seeing that they would take 10 to 15 minutes to write a sermon.
Hours?
Hours. We're really good.
They're really efficient.
So a lot of it was research. And so Hannah would write the sermon series, pick the text, give us pages of background, and even did kind of a flow of where the sermon can go. And all of our sites did the same. What we do now, for me, is I go from site to site, and I'm the discipleship pastor for all the sites, doing small groups and like new member classes. They all come together, and I do them all together for all the sites. But I go from site to site, so I only have to preach one scripture 4 times, and I tweak it for each site. But the pastors only have to do 2 sermons a month. And so the rest of the time opens up for pastoral care, meeting with your board, all of that.
Mm-hmm. And I know when I was at UVC, we did pre what Hannah was doing. Each pastor would take on a sermon series and kind of choose the scriptures maybe for that month, and then kind of do a little bit more of a deep dive. So it was less than what Hannah was doing. But so yeah, there's all sorts of ways to do that. And I think the more sites you have, the more efficiencies you can find in it. 2 sites, you're still going to be at the beginning of it. Yep.
Hold on a second.
How does the church's infrastructure work? You say there's 2 separate churches still, but do they combine committees, for instance? You know,
Yeah, so for the UVC River Forest experiment, they are still 2 separate churches. What we're talking about, though, is a full merger. So you would do the exploring, and then we would make it a merger. Both churches would vote, at which point you just have one trustee committee, and some churches have gone to the one board model. Now, UVC has one board. So now what I will say is that at UVC, and again, it depends on the model you want, right? There's a lot of flexibility here. So at UVC, money was kept track that was going in, right, from the sites, and money is tracked going out. But it's very Acts 2 in that this site might bring in 50,000, but it spends 125,000. Does that make sense? This site might bring in 125,000 and it's spending 100. So but another church, if you adopt a church everywhere, United Methodist Church, you might say, money comes in, needs to pay for that site pastor, janitorial staff, that might be the model that you use. So those are again, back to the stages of getting along. Those are some of the questions that you're working out in the preparing and finalizing stage. And I can't tell you what is best, because that will be what you would need to work out with the other congregation. There's not a right way, so to say. Yeah.
I was just wondering, so the churches that you're meeting with tomorrow, their being there, was that their idea? Is this something that...
No, I invited them.
Okay. And
I sent a similar letter, a similar email to their leadership but it said basically like, over the last 10 years, because anybody can look on umdata.org and see the trends of church. Over the last 10 years, I see a trend in your congregation. We want to reverse that trend. One way to do it, because there's another way to disrupt that trend too, right? There's other ways. One way to disrupt that trend is through this adoption merger. And so I want to talk about it. So yeah.
would you say they're coming to the meeting receptive or kind of? It'll be mixed, probably.
I think there's a lot of fear, a lot of grief. That's why I don't want to. I'm going to share with you because I believe in transparency, but I'm also aware that this is being broadcast, and I don't think we need that transparent, right? I also think there's congregations that are, sort of like River Forest. We want something different. We have a heart for reaching new people. We just haven't figured out how to do it. And so there's maybe some excitement too. We'll see. I chose to do that meeting on Zoom because in speaking with some folks, you know how you can kind of hide out on Zoom in a way that you can't in person? We just thought that would be a little easier for them, and then later I can do in-person conversations with them. Yeah, Grace.
Thank you, DS. I'm in whatever the stage is that comes before exploring. So this is great that I'm really being open-hearted, open-minded, and allowing the Spirit to move and this kind of thing. So it's of course a lot because we're just coming out of this pandemic, and I don't know about everybody else, but I'm just thinking, oh, this is more work already. Mm-hmm. Already, I'm struggling trying to get an acolyte for kind of thing. So that feels good. Then now my question is this something that is happening in the annual conference in the denomination, or is this something
this is
for
the Brittany
our
Isaac
district?
special.
Okay. So that's and also is this is this something that is precursor to our annual conference merging with another annual conference and being adopted by another? I don't know. I'm just wondering. I'm just kind of trying to think here what this pattern reminds me of.
We met with your former people earlier what is today? Tuesday, last week. We met with the Wisconsin cabinet when we were on retreat in Wisconsin. The conference, we're not merging conferences. We understand that as a jurisdiction, the elections for this coming year, there will be status quo. So we will have our own bishop at least for 2 years. We also understand till 24 that it's highly likely that we'll have a 2-point charge for bishops starting in 24. And what I mean by 2-point charge is just that. The bishop has 2 episcopal areas that they would serve. So not a merger, just a 2-point charge. Could be, and the small group of people that make that decision. Could be with Wisconsin, could be with Iowa, could be with Indiana, could be with Great Rivers. I think that's all the states we touch, right? Missouri, but they're in the South Central jurisdiction, so it wouldn't be them. Yep. Oh, actually, we also don't touch because Great Rivers.
Let me push and ask. So why not close churches that are struggling?
Why not close churches struggling? Is that what you said? Yeah, that's a great question, Grace. Couple things. There are faithful people in some of these churches that are struggling. The churches that we're going to name are not, like, some of the churches, actually, they're fine financially, because they're in the, I mean, honestly, they're like their buildings are maybe in okay shape, so they're not drowning in that. And there's enough income coming in, but the attendance isn't there. So also, you know, Methodism is shrinking as Christianity is shrinking. And this is the, like, both and. It's what churches need, and it's also looking at the 5,000-foot view. Some of these churches are in fantastic locations. We don't want to close. It's a mission outpost. So if that church's DNA is struggling, friends, I know you're struggling to find acolytes. You also represent the 7 largest churches in our district. That's scary. I mean, that's scary. And so, not that you guys aren't doing good things, but you get what I'm saying, right? So, it is harder, I think, to plant a church from scratch than to adopt a church with you guys have good DNA. You guys are in pretty healthy congregations. And so I know it's a big push, but it's a bigger push to do some other ways. So that's why you're here tonight, and I know it's asking a lot, Grace. I do. I mean, you also just have a new associate that started, and you lost a longtime deacon who, I mean, so you also got a lot of transitions happening, right? And I thought I might not invite First Evanston, and same with UVC. I was like, I probably shouldn't invite them either because they, which is why Christian isn't here, because by the time I got around to inviting, he was on renewal leave, and so he got back like on Monday. But I invited you even in the midst of those transitions because we're not talking about the 23 appointment year, right? It could be the 24 or the 25, and I'm presenting this to you, and yes, I will roll off the cabinet, but it doesn't mean that you still can't do this work, right? Like, if you're feeling called to it, awesome. So it doesn't have to be on me. Yeah.
The training on the 3rd of December, are there other meetings that you have envisioned that we should go, when we go back to our congregations, these 7 churches, that we should invite our churches to participate in? Or what other next steps, I guess?
Yeah,
really.
so some other next steps. James, do you want to speak for just a minute? I met with you guys in June. Do you want to speak just a little bit about some of the internal conversations that you've had? I know you haven't had a lot, but just, is that okay to call on you? Yeah.
Well, the first thing I would say is we're still having internal conversations, right? And we just had our leaders retreat a week ago in Skokie at the log cabin. And so we're still having conversations.
Right.
And we still have lots of questions about what's going to happen. We are not, I think we're fairly clear, we are not going to do it the way River Forest UVC did it. We're very clear that if we join in this partnership, the smaller church has to be absorbed into us and become Kingswood wherever. We have the same questions. I mean, I have the same questions about what I can handle, my capacity. Clayton has those same concerns. We have lots of ministry here. We're rebuilding, we're growing, but all of us have come out of this pandemic in a difficult place. The thing I would add is our conference isn't maybe the best example, but this has worked in other annual conferences. The churches tend to be larger. Church of the Resurrection in Kansas City has taken over a number of churches. They're much, much larger. I know that. But it's been fascinating. That's where I've been spending research time, is how Church of the Resurrection takes over struggling churches, especially in the city and collar suburbs, and is able to really restart that ministry, and those churches are vital. That's also true with Highland Park Church in Dallas, which is United Methodist, and we have a relationship with The Gathering.
That's where actually Holly Katz, who was on there, she came out of The Gathering to begin with.
So The Gathering's a United Methodist Church in St. Louis, and they've done several takeovers of churches, buildings, the same kind of this active adoption merger. So our conference doesn't have really the healthy DNA other than maybe UVC's experience with West River Forest, but we've seen it in other places. But I would just say to everybody in the room, we're still having conversations at every level. Our worship team last night met. We spent 30 minutes talking about what this would look like. So, I mean, people are here from our church, and I would say we are cautiously open, but we know there's a lot of questions we have to have answered. What we're trying to get clear, at least at the church council level, is what we need in place to move forward.
Right.
So there's certain things that we're going to require of the conference for us to move forward. And if they can't meet that, and that's not a slight to you, DS, we're not going to do it. So we want to make sure that all of these things are in place and that we're able to grow out of that. And it is a heart for reaching people for Christ, because our church, like all of your churches, we're regional, right? People drive from all over, right? And so we know communities north of us that desperately need a United Methodist presence. And a lot of churches have closed north of us. So we're not really interested south, but we are interested northeast and possibly northwest. And we were already talking about satellites, like non-geographical building satellites, like a worship service, like Lake Zurich, for example, has no United Methodist presence. And for 5 years, we've been talking about that, and probably would have done something if it hadn't been for the pandemic. Right. So I don't know if that helps you, but we're talking at every level, every committee, and we're very clear the church conference has to approve it substantially. We're not going to do this with a congregation who's reluctant, and we're going to look at the models outside the conference at Church of the Resurrection, the Gathering, Highland Park United Methodist Church, and there are many other successful stories. So that's probably more than I.
Thank you for that. And yeah, that's yours. Part of the reason I wanted you all to come together too is because I think there's questions that you all are going to think of together, and minds together are going to be better resourced than me one-on-one conversation with you as congregations. So if one congregation goes in 24, let's say, we'll learn, and then you can reach out to that congregation. What did you learn? What do we need to know? We're in this discernment, but we're better together. So, yeah.
I'm going to go ahead and go there. I know we're Northern Illinois Conference. We've got a tremendous legacy in terms of our standing with inclusivity. However, is part of this because we're anticipating smaller congregations coming out of GC24?
No. I mean, I guess I hadn't thought about that. No. I mean, in terms of churches, I think we have, maybe there's 3 churches that are have expressed interest in disaffiliating. I would say that a lot of folks have left over that. I think the folks that are still around are around. I could be wrong. You guys are in the local church more than me. So, but no, I hadn't thought about that at all. Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Question. Do you think that will impact the ability to do these types of merger and adoptions, or whatever happens next year? And it will happen next year, right?
I forgot my crystal ball at home.
But, so, I mean, that uncertainty on top of, coming out of a pandemic and all of that, it can make thinking about this a little bit more difficult, I guess, because if you look to the future, what is the future? And I mean, nobody knows, you're right, and you have to go on faith, but it is a little worrisome. I mean, I've had that same question. So what happens, if when the United Methodist Church splits, if people leave, if it looks very different in 5 years, what does that look like for all of us? I don't know. So
Yeah,
I
so
appreciate that question.
I have appreciated our bishop's reframing of it, and it's, you see it in just what I said. We're not splitting. there's a couple of folks that have decided that they want to leave, a couple of congregations. I just read a beautiful witness from Alabama, West Florida. I don't know if you guys saw the United Methodist News Service of all the kind of bubbling up are churches that are sort of saying the WCA doesn't speak for us in the more conservative, in their making these beautiful statements. So I'm probably super naive, but I'm thinking about one of our more conservative churches, and it was just after, for some reason, and it's odd, but after GC 2019, a lot of conservative folks left, which, if you look at it, doesn't make sense because they kind of got their way. Excuse me, they got their way, but it happened. So you can call me naive. I feel like our future's bright. Yeah. What's that?
I thought they were, at Cosmopolitan, I thought they were very conservative, and they were, and they wanted to vote to leave.
Tell them about your last day.
So they wanted to vote to leave the conference and join the World, I don't know what their name is. And so I said, okay, Brittany was there, and we were discussing this, and I mean, they voted not to leave, but they said they were wondering of not having same-sex weddings, and I think they forgot that I was gay, and I'm like, well, you would want me to have a wedding somewhere else and invite all of you because I love all of you, and you would be invited to my wedding at another church? And they're like, oh. It's not that they weren't for it, it's just that it wasn't a concept that was close to their heart. Once you meet someone, it changes everything. And so they're opening up a youth thing on Monday nights for the local evangelical Christian school. Cosmopolitan on Monday nights is having a LGBTQ youth night for the students that can't go there.
Yeah, it's really cool because I was talking to their new pastor, John, and he was saying, you know what, we're giving cover for these conservative Christian schools that get their donations from the Missouri Synod and from, whatever. The principals want to be inclusive, but their money is trapped. And so he's like, let us take the heat. Refer all your kids to us. We'll do the queer youth group. Yeah. So anyway, it's kind of fun. And Cosmo's excited about it. Yeah.
Brittany?
Yeah.
You're very committed to this, and you are asking us to be committed to it as well.
To what?
To embracing, at least looking at this.
New possibilities,
but
yes.
you had also mentioned that this could very well come to fruition after you are no longer DS. Mm-hmm. So would you be seeking a position then for the conference to establish whereby you would continue your involvement in this so that we wouldn't get halfway down the road and then someone else come in and have a different thought process?
Yeah, that's the hard part about the superintendency and the it's good in some ways, right? Because I a year after being in this position, I realized how disconnected I was from the church, right? Like how out of touch I was with many things. And so it's good to get new people to come into this position because then you keep some of that relevancy. But it's hard when you're starting new things and, new DS, something new coming through, right? Ideally, we can get some sort of broader, because I do think this conference has like, ooh, this is the new shiny thing, right? But for 3-4 years now, we've had a vital congregation goal, right? 3 years we've had vital congregation goal. It's one of our 3 strategic goals. And this is the 3rd time that Reverend Martin Lee is hosting this vital merger workshop. So it's something that's kind of does have a slow burn in our conference. So and my goal is always to set up the work so that it's not contingent upon a person. So my hope would be that you need the stable pastoral leadership, but that it shouldn't be contingent upon a DS. I've got a really great building and location chair, co-chair, and, this is part of our, that's why you have building location people here tonight, because we want this to be part of our strategy. Great team members on it. So I'm hoping that we have enough systems in place that it's not about me. Does that help? You should say something, Stuart, so everybody knows that it's, yeah.
Well, that's why I asked the question, too, about next steps.
Mm-hmm.
So both, what do we take back to our local congregations? And I guess, since I have the mic, I have a follow-up question for James. We're kind of getting this for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, Ben and I have heard this through our work at the district level. When did you and Kingswood start this process? You described where you are with your leadership team and so forth. How long has it taken to get to where you are today?
James has been thinking about this for years, but
Yeah, part of this, I guess what I want to say is the church has been thinking about this, not me, about satellite. That's been in our vision plans for the last 3 vision plans. We could just never pull it off. The superintendent approached us about this vital merger option. I personally have a deep commitment to us doing something in a new place so that we can reach people in these underserved communities, right? And we don't know what that is. We don't know. We don't know. So the satellite thing has been in our vision plan and is in our new vision plan, right? Which was approved in 2020, our 2017 plan, our 2013 plan. But Stuart, we have not been able to launch that in the way that we thought about offsite. That just stuff didn't happen. So we don't have it worked out. I don't want to say that. And this kind of conversation didn't start till the superintendent met with our staff parish committee in June. So Clayton and I have been having conversations about that. Is Jesus calling us to this? Is Jesus calling us to do this? And ultimately, that's what we have to answer in addition to the church leadership. Is Jesus calling us to this? And is Jesus calling us to this site? And I don't have that answer. But that's why we have made no decisions other than the vision plan points us towards satellite, because this facility is great, but it's pretty locked as far as going much larger, right? So we need to think about what can we do somewhere else. And frankly, I'll tell you, we may decide in this process that taking on another facility, because our trustees have raised key questions about that. We just did a capital campaign before the pandemic for $1 million to replace the roof. There's nothing sexy about that at all. We still are projecting on our screen from a cart, right? So that's, yeah, right. And we're in Willow Creek land, so you know how that goes, right? But we replaced the roof. It was the right thing to do, and we did it so we could have a safe, clean environment for all the ministries and the homeless shelter and everything we do here. But taking over a building may not be where Jesus is calling us. I don't know that. But I do think, this is me, not necessarily our leaders, though our vision plan reflects it. I do think Jesus is calling us to do a satellite. I just don't know what it looks like and where it will be. Yeah.
And hear me tonight. Tonight's meant to begin conversation, and if none of you adopt a church, but you start a new ministry of some sort, I'm going to be jumping up and down excited, right? This truly is the work of discerning in your community where the Spirit's calling you. If it's not of God, it's not going to stick, right? And so I'm not going to force something. I'm going to keep asking questions. I'm going to call you into meetings and say, what are you, where are you being called to? But I'm not going to force something because it won't take. Did you have a question? Oh, no.
Are there adoption or other participation models that don't end in merger, but do get the failing congregation restarted and and active ministries and discipleship.
We don't know what's going to happen with the River Forest UVC. Maybe they'll never vote to merge. I don't know. I'm laughing with your question because I went to the Vital Merger workshop, I think it was last March, and I had a Board of Pension meeting in the middle of it that I had to Zoom into, and usually those meetings are like 30 minutes, but this was like a 2-hour meeting. So I missed a good portion of the workshop that I didn't get to hear. I think that there's probably more collaborative ministry co-op models, and we're looking at some of those things in the city. Particularly, we have some very diverse congregations in the city, and I would feel like I would be very suspicious of a suburban white congregation going in to adopt the Vietnamese congregation, right? So what does it look like if First Vietnamese and African Community and Bethany, they're all kind of close and they maybe do some collaborative ministry, co-op ministry? That's a different model. So yeah, there are other models out there. In this, Dirk's book, Vital Merger, does it talk about some of the partnerships? I haven't read the whole thing. I've read parts of it, and now I can't remember. I don't think it does. Yes. It does? Okay. Yeah, Wendy. Oh, Jay, I'm sorry, I didn't see you.
The question, I believe Pastor Grace raised the question earlier, why not just close churches who are in a pretty vulnerable place? So my understanding from the little bit that I've read, and this is, I know, all new to our Trinity folks, I've just done a little bit of reading just because we've talked about it in district shepherding team. My understanding is the goal of having the multi-site ministries, which is basically the way the adoption mergers work, is because we want to still be in the communities where those church buildings are, right? And so the goal with having 2 sites or multi-sites is to be able to kind of draw that 1/2 mile radius around, right? And be able to reach people in that area.
Yes.
So that's my logic, if that's correct, in trying to, because I think it's a really good question. Why don't we just close churches and use those funds to support churches that or other new ministries or whatever?
Yeah, but so when you close it, I mean, let's talk some logistics here. When you close a church, our disciplines and then our conference standing rules speak more specifically. When you close a church, that money goes into the closed church fund, which helps start new ministries. When you merge a congregation, even if you were to sell that facility, it all stays with the merged congregation. Now, if you sell a facility, the building those resources can't be spent on programming. They have to be invested in facility. You can spend the interest off of them, but so if we close congregations, that money goes to start new churches, but to have a facility that's in a great location, and people that maybe don't want to close, you're starting with a launch team, too, which is huge. So, Jay.
I just wanted to share that 7 years before I retired, I went through a big merger of corporations. And hopefully some of those, I mean, these are human organizations. We went through a lot of global companies, locations, and each culture brings its own things. And the guides that you have put together in the workshop, I'm looking forward to those, but hopefully they're also promoting, our learning from how these other organizations are making it a success. And one thing that comes to mind is when you go through, if Kingswood works with another congregation, it's not going to be just Kingswood. It's not going to be like it was. It's a new chapter. And we need to recognize that up front. And second point is that there's got to be a lot of transparency. We tried bringing best practices from each organization, but not all best practices are going to survive. And so we went through those tough conversations, and sometimes you do feel like you were neglected. And so you have to, promote that kind of working together and creating a new identity, not just hanging on to the old identity.
Yeah, and quite frankly, in corporate, this is like a friendly acquisition that we're talking about. Your congregations have healthy DNA, and so that's what's going to win out, not the congregation that's struggling, right? A church that's struggling got that way for a reason, right? The systems are set up to produce what is there. Maybe not on purpose, right? But it is producing what it's producing. So we want to take the healthy DNA in a sort of friendly acquisition. Yeah.
I just wanted to mention on a personal note, I guess it was about 10 years or more, maybe more ago, I used to be in a Wesleyan church that was closed down, and everyone was kind of scattered, and everybody went to different places. And for the first time in my life, I grew up Catholic, so you can tell I married a Wesleyan, so it was just overwhelming, so we went church shopping, and I was like, it was ghastly, right? So you just went from one church to another trying to figure out, well, do I fit here? Do I fit here? And I went to Catholic church. We looked at Lutheran churches. We looked everywhere. And we were so glad that we found this church. And part of it was the Great Kids program, and that's one of the things we were looking for. But I just want to remind people that when we say closed churches and those people scatter, there were quite a few in that group. They didn't go back to or find a church, and they're just out there. So it is kind of bad to just, maybe if it's one or two, but if it's a lot, these people may not find the Kingswood that we found. And I just wanted to mention that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Grace?
I think that was really helpful, and also thank you, James, for what you said. That helped me a lot with my pre-exploring stage of,
germinating.
Yeah, of where is God calling us to do more than just meet our budget and getting at least 10 new members in the year and baptized at least 5 children, almost like very insular, self. So that was really helpful. Where is God calling us? And the idea of us being a body, being connected, that we really do need to care about others. Because I had been a little bit aloof because it sounded as if how to save other churches. And it was like, but it's not about that. It's about our being connected and our where is God calling us to do more ministry and this opportunity. So thank you for that.
And I will say there's other types of mergers. I don't want to muddy the water. I think we're going to have time for one more question after this, and then we'll. There are other types of mergers. So Faith in Orland Park is a merger of like 3 or 4 congregations. So it's possible that you end up doing a merger where several congregations come together. So this is, again, just one model of a merger. So one more question, or are we ready to